What's up, everyone, and welcome into another episode of Goal Line Dynasty. Today, Tyler and I are going to be going through 2 rounds of a Superflex rookie mock draft. As you guys know, we are only a couple weeks away from the NFL draft, and surprisingly, the consensus has not shaken up very much, even though we are only a few weeks out. But before we get started into the video and start talking about this, both fake mock draft and the NFL mock draft that we're looking at, Tyler, how you doing, buddy?
I'm great, dude. It was a long, weird day with the eclipse. We're recording this Monday, April 8th. Not much is going to change in terms of the fantasy landscape from now until the time this video is released. But a little bit of a crazy day, but excited to get in and talk about some of these guys. I feel like we can probably, fly through the first 8 picks. I think those are pretty locked in. And then after that, maybe we'll get into some real analysis. But I think that, you mentioned it before, like not much has really been shaken up in these mock drafts. I mean, JJ McCarthy has shot up. Nobody's really fallen. We were talking before we started recording about how, like this time last year, there was talks like, oh, JSN, QJ, Addison, like these guys are flowers. They're probably going to fall. Most of them are going to fall past 15 into the 20 range. And it was like the top 10 talk kind of calmed down. At this point this year, it hasn't calmed down. It's only gotten more exaggerated. And now Rome Odunze is in that conversation to be a top 6 guy and all this stuff. I mean, you look down the mock draft and we were talking about it. It's weird. You usually see 101, 102, 103, 104, 105. And it's like, oh, that's the sleeper ADP, the rookie mock draft ADP. But we're actually just looking at landing spots here because 12 of the top 10 picks are going to be fantasy assets this year. So there's a ton to be excited about. It's a deep class.
Yeah, it's nuts, especially when you're looking at Superflex leagues, because you're potentially seeing, you got 4 quarterbacks, 3 receivers, and likely a tight end, probably all going within the top 12 or 13 picks, which is just absolutely nuts, especially when you factor in that there's been, maybe 15, give or take, receivers taken top 5 of all time, and we're potentially getting 2 this year, right, with Marvin Harrison and Malik Nabers. And who knows, some people say Rome Odunze could go before Malik Nabers, which apparently the NFL is pretty damn high on Rome Odunze, so wouldn't surprise me. But anyway, let's jump into this mock draft here. So I've got the results up on the screen. So Tyler, I feel like usually I take the odds and you take the even. So tonight I'm going to let you take pick number 1 overall. I'll take number 2. So go ahead and lead us off here.
All right, yeah. So again, every time we do these drafts, we're under the assumption that this is your one and only pick. So if I only had 1 pick and I had no true positional need, Caleb Williams would be my guy. Not much to talk about. I think we talked about it in one of our most recent videos. Chicago is probably the best landing spot that a rookie quarterback has gone to since, maybe Joe Burrow when he had, or no, they drafted Chase after Burrow got there. They just had T. Higgins when he got there, and they had no offensive line, actually. So probably is one of the best spots that a rookie quarterback since maybe Dak got drafted into, with that like 2016, 2017 Cowboys offense with that offensive line and Zeke and Des Bryant and CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper later on, Can't really think of a better spot than Keenan Allen, DJ Moore. There are even talks about them drafting Rome Odunze at the 9. I mean, that didn't happen in this mock draft, but you never know. They could add another weapon for him. It's DeAndre Swift's in Chicago, right?
Yeah.
I'm correct about that? Yeah, okay. I'm just double checking with all the movement, so I think it's going to be a pretty good situation. I think he's got plenty around him to build, and if I had a barren roster and this was my one and only pick for the year, it'd be Caleb Williams. I can see the argument for Marv, and in certain formats, I play in a lot of 0.25 PPC leagues. Like there's a lot of debate about whether or not Jayden Daniels should go over Caleb Williams in those formats because of how much he rushes. So saying that Caleb Williams is a 101 across all formats, maybe a stretch. I know PPC is kind of a niche setting, but there is some spots where I would go otherwise, and this is specifically for a 12 team. We're talking 12 team Superflex mock draft. Probably should have clarified that to begin with, because if it is a 10 team, I'm going to go with Marvin Harrison, but that's a conversation for another day about quarterback scarcity and in those kind of formats. So again, I spent way too much time talking about the 101 when we all knew who it was going to be.
That's okay, buddy. Well, you make my job easy. Obviously, pick number 2, I'm going to take Marvin Harrison Jr. here. Like you said, there's a lot of people that will take Marvin Harrison 101. As good as we think Marvin Harrison is going to be, I think it's I mean, if you're really well off at the quarterback position, then yeah, I can totally see taking Marvin Harrison at number one overall in a 12-team Superflex. But it's almost a hot take to me to where if you have even the slightest need for quarterback to take Marvin Harrison over Caleb Williams. The only reason why is because, I mean, Caleb Williams is such a highly touted prospect. He's going into such a good offense, a good situation, like you mentioned. And when you look in the grand scheme of things, right? Caleb Williams is going to fail in our eyes if he's not being taken in the top 10 of Superflex startups this time in 2 years. Hell, maybe even this time next year, we want to see him being taken that highly. Where you look at guys like Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, they're all first round picks in startups, but they go like the 108, maybe 109 at the earliest, right? And that's probably where the ceiling is for Marvin Harrison, right? Is to fall in with those receivers. He's not going to surpass Jefferson. He's not going to surpass CeeDee Lamb. He's not going to surpass Jamar Chase, at least not this early on in his career, right? So in terms of just what the value looks like over the next 2, maybe even 3 years of startup drafts, I would say Caleb Williams is going to retain a higher value than Marvin Harrison, no matter how good or bad either one of them are as rookies. So that's just my take there. But didn't really talk too much about Marvin Harrison. I just kind of talked about the position of being 101 versus 102 there. But I don't think I need to bring up too much about Marvin Harrison, right? We all know that he is a generational wide receiver prospect. We know that he's very likely either going to be catching balls from Kyler Murray or Justin Herbert. In the situation of this draft, he goes number 4 overall to Kyler Murray to be his number 1 option, and I have no complaints about that whatsoever. So Tyler, I'm going to let you take over at pick number 3, and I know you're a Jayden Daniels guy, so maybe it's not as difficult as I think it's going to be here, but I am interested to see what you do.
Yeah, and I'll just make a quick comment on Marv too, because the only thing that I don't like about him is his price right now, because he is priced basically at his ceiling. The only players that he can become more valuable than at this point are guys like Puka Amon-Ra, Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson. Like, that's really it, And where you have to pay to get him, sometimes it's tough. Like, when we were excited about JSN last year, we were getting him in like the back end of the 4th round, like maybe like late 3rd in some drafts if we were reaching on him and things like that. But Marvin Harrison, you're having to pay up for him. It feels like there's not a ton of room for him to grow. Maybe 5 spots in like startup ADP, really, if he does smash and do everything that we think he's going to do. Whereas Caleb Williams can advance almost like the full round into that like top end of the 1st. So that's really my only worry, is just where the prices are at right now and where they're being evaluated. But like you said, for the 103 for me, it's going to be Jayden Daniels. I do have like an asphyxiation for this guy. I like watching him. He reminds me of a very much of a taller Kyler Murray. Just watching how fast his feet can move, knowing that he's going to run the ball 8, 9, 10 times a game. And I think he can spin it, man. I mean, I think like watching him throw the football, I can't really say that, because my initial thought when I first like really started watching Jayden Daniels was like, wow, like I feel like he's a better passer than Lamar was coming out of college. But it turns out that I just had a tainted memory of Lamar throwing ducks all over the place in college when it really only happened 1 or 2 times. So I don't think he's quite the passer that Lamar was. I think he's a bit of a project, but I think he's going to be an elite fantasy guy. And like in these formats, like it's proven that if we're looking at 2 or 3 year windows, like even though right now you don't feel great that you drafted Justin Fields at the 103 a couple of years back, like when he was a rookie or whatever it was, like you still got decent production out of him. Like he wasn't a bust for your fantasy team or anything like that. So like if the floor for Jayden Daniels is going to be a guy like Justin Fields, who's going to get 3 years of a leash and going to run the ball all over the place and have the capability of putting up those 35 to 40 point games like every once in a while, once or hopefully once a year, that's really all you're hoping for when it comes to that stuff. But I think that floor makes me feel more comfortable. I think that it's easier for rushing quarterbacks to get up into that top tier than the passing quarterbacks. Like I think it's going to be tougher for Drake Maye to get into like the Joe Burrow, the Justin Herbert type range, Trevor Lawrence, what we thought Trevor Lawrence was last year, like that range. I think it's going to be tougher for him to get there than it will be for Jayden Daniels to get up to like Anthony Richardson, like Lamar, Jalen Hurts. Like I think it's just easier to do that because all you have to be is athletic. Obviously, that was a gross overstatement, but I think you understand the point that I'm making. But that is why I'm going with Jayden Daniels. I think the floor is just higher. I think he might be more fun to watch on the football field, and I think it's going to be an easier path for him to score those fantasy points and then work his way up into the first round of like startup ADP.
Yeah, and I think it's okay to take Jayden Daniels here. I mean, I don't necessarily think it's a hot take him over Drake Maye or Malik Nabers here. I don't love the landing spot though. For the purpose of this, I mean, Jayden Daniels lands in New England. He's going to be running from his life in year one, man. They don't really have a good offensive line. They haven't really added any weapons there. I mean, they have Ramondre Stevenson, Antonio Gibson, Demario Douglas right now, right? Later on in this draft, they take Lad McConkey at the 34th overall pick in the second round, which is good. I mean, I think he'll be a very friendly receiver for a guy like Jayden Daniels who is going to be under duress constantly in year one. But I don't love the landing spot, but I don't mind taking Jayden Daniels at 103. So while I'm talking about landing spots, now I personally, in a lot of formats, in the majority of formats, I'm going to take Drake Maye over Jayden Daniels. However, if Malik Nabers goes to the Chargers at number 5, he gets to be the wide receiver for Justin Herbert. There's no competition there, right? QJ is not very good. Their other receivers are not very good. Austin Eckler is out of there. Like Malik Nabers can step in and arguably be the top producing rookie wide receiver if he gets to step in and be Justin Herbert's number 1 guy, especially if he's a top 5 draft pick like that. So I know I just got done saying Caleb Williams is probably going to be worth more than Marvin Harrison this time next year in a startup. And maybe you can say the same thing about Drake Maye versus Malik Nabers. But the fact of the matter is Malik Nabers could not land in a better possible scenario. Now, if we're looking at this, let's say Drake Maye still goes to Washington and Malik Nabers falls either one spot and goes to the Giants, I'm probably taking Drake Maye and just avoiding that Giants situation right there. But I think this is the perfect scenario. Nabers is the 1B wide receiver of this draft. He's not even behind Marvin Harrison. They are very close, neck and neck. I still prefer Harrison, obviously, but Nabers is the 1B for me. He's a freak athlete. He's going to do amazing things at the next level. And again, getting to catch balls in year one from Justin Herbert is second to none. That's going to be awesome. So I'm going to take him at number 4.
Yeah, and I'm totally fine taking Malik Nabers, especially with that landing spot. Like, my God, Malik Nabers, yeah, go ahead and be Justin Herbert's wide receiver 1 for the next 4 years. Like, I can't blame you for taking that over quarterback. I mean, quarterbacks miss all the time, and especially a guy with, like, the prototype, or the archetype, rather, that Drake Maye is. But made my pick easy here at the 105. Yeah, I'm going to take Drake Maye. Like I said, I'm okay with taking Malik Nabers, especially with this landing spot, over a quarterback because quarterbacks miss all the time. I'm not quite sure that I'm okay with taking Odunze there. And it's not necessarily because of the landing spot. It's more so because of the archetype, the big body wide receiver. And don't get me wrong, Odunze does separate. Like, you look at his reception perception and all that stuff. He passes, like, all of those tests. He wins a ton of routes, all of that stuff. And he's getting the draft capital of the Giants. And even if the Giants do use Daniel Jones for just this year, like, he's on a very short leash, and I don't think he's going to be their long-term quarterback. So that's not something that's really going to scare me off. But I'm gonna take Drake Maye. I'm scared to take that wide receiver archetype. I feel really gross about taking that over Drake Maye. I think he's in a pretty good situation in Washington. I mean, you get a guy like Terry McLaurin. You get a number 2 in Jahan Dotson, and then a half decent running game there in Washington. And I think obviously Drake Maye is going to have the longest leash out of any quarterback that's left on the board. If New England if Washington is going to invest a number 2 overall pick in him, and Washington, like, they have really not had a lockdown quarterback for a long time. So I think that Drake Maye, like, they're hoping that he's going to be there to stay for a long time. So I think they're going to keep putting effort in to build around him. I think that their plan is that he is going to be the future. So I'm gonna take that bet and feel pretty comfy at the 105. Drake Maye is a gunslinger, and even though it is, like I said before, it's going to be tougher for him to get into the Burrow range than a guy like Daniels, I think he's definitely the easiest 105 pick to make. And you're probably pretty happy if Drake Maye falls to you, even if you were hoping and it would fit your roster better that Malik Nabers gets there, because the upside of Drake Maye is CJ Stroud. If he goes out as a historic rookie season or anything close to it, in a decent offense, if he elevates that offense, then we're going to see him skyrocket up boards, and all of a sudden he's going to be passing Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson in terms of, startup ADP and all that stuff. So I like Drake Maye at the 105.
Yeah, and going number 2 overall to Washington. I mean, he lands in a good situation. You got Terry McLaurin, you got Jahan Dotson, you got Austin Eckler now, right? Brian Robinson. So it's a good scenario for him to be in. I definitely like his situation a lot more than Jayden Daniels would be in New England. So yeah, again, like I said, I would still take Drake Maye over Jayden Daniels. So no complaints from me. 106 is going to be weird. Rome Odunze going to the Giants at number 6 is not ideal. Then again, J.J. McCarthy going to Denver at 109, it's good, but it's also not ideal, right? Denver is not necessarily a good offensive team. They have Cortland Sutton, and that's it. They got rid of Jerry Jeudy. They don't have any early day 2 picks to reinforce their wide receiver room or anything like that. Like, this seems like a very bad situation that JJ McCarthy is going to get into. So if JJ McCarthy ends up going to Minnesota, I'm probably considering taking him over Odunze. If Odunze lands with the Giants, I think taking McCarthy in Minnesota over Odunze in New York is not a hot take, personally. However, not taking JJ McCarthy over Rome Odunze if he lands in Denver, so I am going to take Odunze here. It's not an ideal situation, but if there is a receiver in this class that's going to overcome landing with the New York Giants, I think it's going to be Rome Odunze, because he is, not that we've heard from Marvin Harrison in any media outlet whatsoever. He avoids, he seems to avoid interviews, much like his dad did. And then you got Malik Nabers, who is pretty outspoken about how the Giants don't have a quarterback, right? Rome Odunze is the kind of receiver, we saw it at the NFL Combine. He's going to go out there and he's just going to work his ass off. I think he's going to make the best out of a bad situation and just be thankful, to go as high as number 6 overall in the NFL draft. So I think he could really, despite playing with Daniel Jones or whoever's going to be throwing in the ball, I think he'll still have a solid rookie season with the Giants. And I do genuinely think that if Odunze goes to the Giants and McCarthy goes to Denver, I think we are still taking Odunze higher than JJ McCarthy in startup drafts next year. So I think that's where the value is, and I'm going to take him at 106.
Yeah, and like when you really look at these receivers and what happens to their value when they come into the league, they don't necessarily have to put up a bunch of fantasy points. Like, look at what just happened with Drake London. Look what's happening with Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. People are looking at the peripherals and just basically saying, like, yeah, like, trust me, bro. Like, it's the fantasy points are going to come eventually. If they have a high yards per route run, if they have, a high target share, high volume, if they're in a bad offense, people are just willing to say, like, I'm going to hold that value and it's going to retain, and I'm just going to wait for that offense to change. We're finally at a point now where you can resell Drake London for, like the price that you paid for him a couple years back. And I think that Rome Odunze kind of fits this archetype. If he goes out there and he puts up decent peripherals and good, analytical numbers and the things that people are looking for, and checks those boxes. I mean, I think that he's one that he's going to be a stable asset for the next at least 2 or 3 years, 4 through his rookie contract. So here at the 107, I think my choice is actually relatively easy here. I'm one who has been screaming against drafting tight ends. So I'm going to go with J.J. McCarthy, even though, all the things you just said are true. Denver is not a great landing spot for a rookie quarterback right now. There's not a ton of help there. I think the best receiver on their roster right now is Marvin Mims. Like, I don't even really know. It's pretty barren there. I think they're probably going to lean on the running game. He's probably going to be more of a game manager, but I think he's going to be a guy who holds a starting job. If he's getting this draft capital, if he's getting top 10 draft capital, he's going to hold a starting job for another 2 or 3 years. And I mean, you even say like the same thing I just talked about with Rome Odunze, Drake London, with those guys who retain value. Even like Bryce Young, like you're not getting the 102 value for him right now that you spent last year, 103, whatever it was, but you're still able to sell him for 108, 109.
Later
and
first,
it's not going to be tough. Yeah, but it's not going to be tough for him to get back in the good graces. Like if he comes out and all of a sudden, like Deontay Johnson helps this offense, finally gives him a receiver, and he's able to put up 18 points a game, like a Trevor Lawrence type season. Like it's not going to be tough for him to get back into the good graces of the dynasty community, and he's going to be able to be sold for those prices again. That 103, 104, 102, whatever you like. Whatever you think is fair value for a starting quarterback that you're happy to put in your lineup for the next 2 or 3 years on this rookie contract, like whatever you think that price is, you're going to be able to get for him. So I'm going to take JJ McCarthy. Job security. I don't think Denver, obviously they don't have a ton of assets, and this is the bet that they're making. They whiffed on the Russell Wilson bet. So this is the one that they're going to make, and I'll make it with him at the 107. I think it's a good price, and I think it's a spot where he could easily, return higher value than this. I could easily be able to, if I don't really love JJ McCarthy, I can easily, if he plays well, can easily move him for a better asset or, something liquid. This is a piece that's going to be liquid all offseason. These top 7 picks, like these receivers and quarterbacks, people are going to want them until they fall off the face of the earth or something like that. So I'm going to take that and say F the tight end position because I got George Kittle or some shit like that lined up.
Yeah, and you and I are both pretty, I don't want to say we're low on Brock Bowers. I think we're just looking at it with a level head, right? Like having Sam Laporta and Dalton Kincaid do what they did as rookies last year, I mean, that's awesome. Go back a couple years, what Kyle Pitts did as a rookie, that's awesome. Go back a few years before that, what Evan Ingram did as a rookie, that's awesome. But it's really not the norm. And I know Brock Bowers is like a quote unquote generational tight end prospect. But the fact of the matter is the tight end position is one of the hardest outside of the quarterback position to play and to adapt to at the NFL level. Like these guys, they need to block, they need to run routes, they need to catch, they need to do everything perfectly before they're consistently out there on the field. Now, Brock Bowers going to the Jets at pick 10 overall, he's going to see the field immediately because who's he fighting with in camp? Tyler Conklin, like it's not the end of the world. Brock Bowers is going to see a lot of opportunity, but I can't take him. I can't take him at 108 because there's 2 reasons. One, I don't like Michael Penix at all. But in this mock draft, he goes in the first round to Minnesota at number 23 overall. That's a phenomenal landing spot. However, I'm not even going with Michael Penix. I'm actually going to go with the only running back that was selected in round 2. My pre-draft RB1, Trey Benson, goes to the Dallas Cowboys at pick 56 overall in the second round. And some people are going to watch this video and say there's no shot that you can take Benson over Bowers, right? I think there definitely is a shot that I can take Benson over Bowers. And this is likely what I would do in real life as well, because there is no better landing spot for a rookie running back. Honestly, this might be the only good landing spot for a rookie running back coming into 2024. Trey Benson would step into this offense and get like just about every damn touch out of the backfield. And Lord knows Dallas is going to need their running back to produce this year. I mean, Tony Pollard had a bad year last year, and he was still like a top 15, top 18 running back in PPR. That'd be Trey Benson's floor. Like, I would not be the least bit surprised to see Trey Benson go out there and have at least a low-end RB1 season right off the rip in Dallas. So I'm going to take that, expecting to get a very good return on dividends there. Yeah, it might be a hot take to take him over the longevity of Brock Bowers or the perceived first-round talent of Michael Penix in a phenomenal landing spot here. But, man, this is a dream spot for Trey Benson, so I'm going to take him here.
Yeah, and I don't blame you, but you really threw me for a friggin' wrench here. You took the words right out of my mouth when you said that Tony Pollard had a really bad year and still finished as a top 15 running back. You took the words right out of my mouth. I mean, it's a very high floor to be the Dallas Cowboys starting running back. So he's definitely going to return that 108 value for you. I think, though, because I feel like I can do a lot with that 108. I feel like I have access to a lot of elite running backs that I wouldn't, maybe not elite, but very good running backs that at that spot, I feel like I could trade that 108 for a lot. Maybe I'm getting too cute and getting off topic, but I feel like because I can trade that 108 for a lot of other running backs, I wouldn't necessarily want to spend it on one. I might want to spend it on one that can really increase a lot like on something that can really increase a lot in value. But I don't disagree with anything that you just said, and I think that he's got an incredibly high floor.
Well,
But
and
here now, I'm
hold
go
on,
on.
and to that point, I mean, taking Trey Benson. I was going to say taking Trey Benson at 108 there. I mean, if this is what the board looks like, if my number one guy on the board is Trey Benson, damn well knowing most of my league's number one guy is going to be Brock Bowers, and also damn well knowing that there's got to be at least one guy in this league that really needs Michael Penix, I'm putting this pick on the trade block, and I'm using just about every minute that I have on draft day to trade this pick because I like Trey Benson. I think landing in Dallas is a superb scenario, but with what's on the board currently, especially with Brock Bowers there, I think you could get a pretty good ransom for 108 in this exact scenario. So I don't hate that you brought that up, but I just wasn't putting my mind there. But I'll let you go ahead and take your pick 9 here.
No, I was hoping you were going to talk for a little bit longer because I still kind of need some time to think. So here I am still stalling while I'm thinking. But I'll pull the trigger. I'm going to go with Michael Penix Jr. I mean, you see, even like with a guy like he's getting better draft capital than Will Levis, definitely in a better situation than Will Levis. And I understand the guy's old. I understand that he's, going to be putting in for like his pension soon and all of that stuff. But, I don't know, he goes to a really good landing spot, and the floor is probably really high. Tough to be a bad quarterback when you're throwing the ball to Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, T.J. Hawkinson, and whatever else that they end up coming up with in the future. So I like J.J. McCarthy. He's like a lot of people say, he's a winner. He's I'm looking at J.J. McCarthy. I keep messing up these names. Michael Penix. He was a winner. He elevated that offense in Washington. They were a winning football. He turned them into a very elite program over there. So I like when guys can do that. It means a lot to me. Even if you are old, it means a lot to me when you play for one of the best college football teams in the country and you're their leader. So I'm going to take the shot on him and know that, like, even if I totally whiff on a quarterback at the 1-9, even if I get absolutely nothing out of this and he's just a starter for, I don't know, like a Trey Lance type of opportunity, it's like, okay, whatever. I wasted the 109 on what could have been the next, really maybe quarterback that's held up by a really good situation, but that I don't care. It would score fantasy points for me. So because he ends up with such a zoo of just absolute killers around him in an offense, like I don't really know if there's a much better weapon arsenal in the league other than maybe San Francisco outside of like Minnesota. I would take the combination of Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, T.J. Hawkinson over. I would take it over the new Houston 3 wide receivers. I would take it. I would probably take it over, over the Cincinnati. If I don't even know if you can call anything a trio there. They don't really have a third piece, but over the 2 guys that are over there, I would take it over just about any situation in the league, really. So I'm going to go with Michael Penix and feel good about the spot that he's sitting in and feel good about, the guys that are around him and see what kind of fantasy points they can buy me, because I'll get 4 points at least every time Justin Jefferson scores a touchdown. So it can't be that bad.
Here's my issue with taking Michael Penix. So I'm going to take Brock Bowers, and personally, I would take Brock Bowers over Michael Penix. It's a really good scenario or a good situation, like you were saying. But the thing with Michael Penix, if he goes number 23 overall, Minnesota very likely starts the season with Sam Darnold. Now, I don't think Sam Darnold's going to play the entire season. I think Michael Penix will get a shot at some point in the season there. But I taking a quarterback at that point who might not necessarily be super pro ready, and you have a journeyman backup like Sam Darnold, I do think it would be a little bit before we saw Michael Penix step out there on the field. Also, as a player, I'm just really not a big fan of his. Like you said, I think he's going to be completely carried by being in a good situation in Minnesota. And I know that there's looming rumors on Justin Jefferson holding out. Justin Jefferson could be traded. Really, this entire offense rides on Justin Jefferson. TJ Hawkinson is amazing. Jordan Addison is amazing, but neither one of them is even half the value that Justin Jefferson is, right? If something happens to him, I really want no part in Michael Penix whatsoever. So that's my take there. But moving on to Brock Bowers, who I would have probably taken at 109, there's not much to say, right? We brought it up already. He's a generational talent. He's going to go catch balls from Aaron Rodgers. He is very likely to at least repeat maybe like a Dalton Kincaid success kind of season where he's going to have spike weeks. He's going to finish as, maybe like a top 7 to top 8 tight end as a year one player there. So I think the skid stops here. I think in most mock drafts that I've seen, I have yet to see Brock Bowers fall all the way to number 10 where he just fell in ours. But stranger things have happened, right? I know you and I, we're different, but similar enough to agree that Brock Bowers being taken top 6, maybe even top 7 in a lot of scenarios is just, it's too rich for my blood for tight ends, especially with how deep this position suddenly is, right? Like you got Laporta, you got Trey McBride, you got Mark Andrews, you got Travis Kelce, you got this guy, you got that guy. Like there's 8 or 9 tight ends that I would be just as comfortable, if not more comfortable, with plugging into my lineup in 2024 than Brock Bowers, right? So it is what it is there, but the skid will stop there. And Tyler, I'll let you go ahead and pick number 11.
Yeah, and I would have taken Brock Bowers though too. I think for me the tight end position is just so oversaturated. When you think about like you could name 12 guys off the top of your head that you would look at your lineup and be like, oh, like I'm good at tight end. I don't need anybody. You have a guy like if you have a guy like Kelce, you're still probably riding that out, right? If you have any of the top 3 guys, McBride, Laporta, Kincaid, you feel great. If you have David Njoku, you are running that bet back because he is, one of the better weapons there. That's 5 right there. If you have George Kittle, he can give you spike weeks. There's 6. You have Kyle Pitts, probably haven't given up on that bet. There's 7. Jake Ferguson, you feel comfortable with. Yeah, Evan Ingram, Jake Ferguson. There's 9 or 10 right there. So it's like what is the path for Brock Bowers to really become all that much more valuable? Because Sam Laporta just finished as a tight end 1 as a rookie, which is friggin' absurd. Yeah. And what can you really get? Right? Can you get the 105 for Laporta? Maybe. 0.75 10 in premium league. Can you get the 104 though? Probably not. Like unless the format heavily favors tight end, people probably aren't trading you Malik Nabers. Like it's still not getting you access into those like elite receiver prospects, and definitely not like if I'm trading Justin Jefferson, am I ever looking for Sam Laporta to be the main part of the deal? Like no, it doesn't happen. So I think 110 is entirely appropriate for Bowers. That's definitely where I'd be comfortable taking him. Ironically, went at the 110 in our draft and in the NFL mock draft. But I also don't think like Aaron Rodgers he's never really favored a tight end. I think he's really more excited. Not that he wouldn't, because Brock Bowers is like a unicorn. He's just as much of a receiver as he is a tight end. But it's not like he's going into a totally barren wasteland. They've got Mike Williams there. They got Garrett Wilson. They've got Breece Hall. So I think it's going to be an efficient place. He might score a lot of touchdowns. I don't know. But it's hard to be a really difference-making tight end. It's very easy to be a startable tight end. So while I think he could probably retain the 110 value, I think it's going to be tough for him to get much higher than that. So here for me at the 111, I think this is actually definitely a catbird seat if this is how the NFL draft shakes out. I'm going to take Brian Thomas, who was drafted at the back end of the first round at pick 28 to Buffalo. This is a guy who like when I think I talked about this the last video, when I really dove into like Jayden Daniels and watching his tape and all that stuff, like Brian Thomas Jr. I think he's definitely the more exciting receiver to watch. Like I think he makes the crazier plays and the more like highlight reel plays in that LSU offense. He was able to put up almost 1,200 yards next to Malik Nabers. 17 touchdowns. That is a lot of friggin' touchdowns. He's a big body guy. I think he's got a very high ceiling. And now that he would go and be Josh Allen's likely number 1 receiver, if you consider him better than Khalil Shakir, which I obviously don't. But yeah, I think Brian Thomas is set up for success and that career arc and trajectory of, kind of like what we said with Quentin Johnson last year. Like you have the opportunity to go be Justin Herbert's long-term wide receiver 1. Obviously, he sucked and belongs in the garbage. But hopefully Brian Thomas Jr. doesn't suck and belong in the garbage, and hopefully he can be Josh Allen's long-term wide receiver 1. So I'd be more than comfortable taking him at the back end of the first round. And, if he can have some kind of a Rashee Rice type season or something like that, then great. I'm increasing in value, and I'm hitting on another receiver.
We just don't want him to have a Rashee Rice type off season, right? Yeah, it's brutal. It's brutal. But let's move in 112 here. I've got a decision to make here because my number 5 wide receiver for this class is AD Mitchell. Now, AD Mitchell finds himself going pick number 1 of the second round, so 33 overall, to Carolina here. But Xavier Worthy, he is my number 7, I believe, rookie wide receiver, and that might even be a little too low for a lot of people's likings. But Xavier Worthy goes to the Chiefs, which I think is just about the only scenario where I'm taking Xavier Worthy over AD Mitchell. So I am going to take Xavier Worthy here, and here's the reason why. So Xavier Worthy, he's good, right? He can run a good route, and obviously he's incredibly fast. If he goes to Kansas City, it's because Patrick Mahomes requested him to go to Kansas City. Like, if you don't think Pat Mahomes has every single say into which receiver they're going to take if they take one at number 32, it's 90% Pat Mahomes' decision, 10% GM here, right? So if Pat Mahomes is going to handpick a guy who he already has gone crazy on Twitter for, like Pat Mahomes was live tweeting the NFL Combine, and when Xavier Worthy broke the record, Pat Mahomes had something to say about that, and he was pretty damn impressed. Now, the weird thing is we don't know what's going on with Rashee Rice. We know Marquise Brown is there. Marquise Brown is what I would want the Xavier Worthy role to be, right? But the good news is Marquise Brown is only there for a year. Rashee Rice, we don't know what's going on with him. Very likely maybe some sort of suspension coming up in 2024. I don't know. But the fact of the matter is Pat Mahomes could go off for 50 touchdowns in a single season. No one would bat an eye. Pat Mahomes could throw for 5,000 yards in a single season, and no one could bat an eye. This is a fantastic scenario for him to be in. I don't have Worthy significantly lower than guys like AD Mitchell or my other guy right above him, Troy Franklin. So I'm going to take him because he lands in the best scenario. He's got a very sky-high ceiling with Kansas City.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what you really want to target here. Like, at this point in the draft, is there really any sort of massive talent gap that you see between any of these receivers, or is it more likely going to come down to like what situation are you in? Yeah, I mean, is there anybody in the world who thinks that Nico Collins is probably a more talented receiver than Garrett Wilson? No, but he's in a better situation with a better quarterback, or at least had a healthier quarterback last year, and scored a shit ton more fantasy points. So it's coming about that like landing spots really matter, and especially when you're investing these late firsts, early seconds in these guys, like. I think if there was a massive talent gap, then they wouldn't be getting drafted, one pick away from one another. So I'll definitely go on what I think is a better landing spot, and I'm fine with taking my shot on X at this point in the draft. Here, I feel like there's a couple of options. I don't hate Lad McConkey to New England if if Jayden Daniels is there and he's supposed to be the number one receiver for that rookie quarterback. Definitely don't hate that. Don't hate AD Mitchell going to Carolina and likely being, Bryce Young's number 2 and future wide receiver 1. I haven't really looked into what the Deontay Johnston contract looks like. I'm sure you know exactly how long he's going to be there for down to the second, based on your Carolina knowledge. But here, I'm actually going to go with Jonathon Brooks. I think I saw it, and maybe this is just because I was reading a lot about him earlier, but he really is the guy who's just got like the baked-in excuse. Like, he doesn't have to be good. People are going to make an excuse for him no matter what, because people think he's already, like most people, is like RB1, RB2 in the class, like before landing spots, and like rightfully so. The guy is talented, put up like 100 yards a game in college for Texas, and scored 11 touchdowns, all that stuff. He was very productive and very good there. But because he's coming off that injury, like, his value is not going to tank pretty much no matter what he does this year, whether he doesn't play, whether he comes back week 5 and is really slow and then puts up like 1 or 2 16, 17-point games. People are like, oh my God, like look, like this is what it's going to be the whole time next year. Like there's going to be a market for this guy regardless next year. And I think just because I don't feel totally confident on getting production out of a lot of the other guys, I'm just going to stick with who I think is going to, retain that value and be a flexible piece moving forward into, next offseason, late in the season. Never know when a rebuilding team is going to say, yeah, like I'll give you my, I don't know, Alvin Kamara for a shot on Jonathon Brooks to see what he is when he gets healthy. Like you never really know what you're going to be able to turn that into because he's probably not going to be playing for a little bit. I think it's just easier to hold that name value. Like look at what Jameson Williams did, right? I keep comparing these guys to previous rookie picks, but it's just like, I know we're talking about a receiver here, but Jameson Williams came out and, was unhealthy and then suspended and all that stuff. And people were like clinging on, and I know you were one of them, but people were clinging on to like what Jameson Williams could be. He was like the wide receiver 16 up until, I don't know, like week 5 last year or something like that. Like the hopium was just, it was flowing through the veins of everyone. I liked Jameson Williams. I'm not saying I was against him, but point being is when these guys are not on the field, people will bake in excuses and the value will stay. So I'm going to take Jonathon Brooks because I don't feel in love with any of these other landing spots, for any of these other guys.
Yeah, and it's a good scenario, right? Because Carolina just beefed up their offensive line this year. Jonathon Brooks is going to have the opportunity to sit behind him. Chuba Hubbard's contract expires this year. Miles Sanders has an out in his contract after this year, right? So I think that the stars kind of align. If you take Jonathon Brooks, it's not a 2024 pick, it's a 2025 pick. Like that's how you have to look at it. But Jonathon Brooks might be the most talented running back in this entire draft cycle, right? So definitely not a bad pick there. I'm going to stick with the Carolina topic here. So you took Jonathon Brooks. I'm going to take AD Mitchell. Again, just like those expiring running back contracts, we have those with the wide receivers in Carolina as well. Deontay Johnson is only signed through 2024. Adam Thielen has an out in his contract at the end of 2024. Now, this is a really good scenario for AD Mitchell, in my opinion. I don't want AD Mitchell there's a possibility he could go to Buffalo, right? I don't want that to happen. And I know it's a better situation for him to be in on paper. But the thing with AD Mitchell is I think he's going to need a year to settle in. I think it would be really beneficial for him to share a field with Adam Thielen, for him to share a field with Deontay Johnson, even though he has a completely different play style than those two. I think it would be nice that he can go in as a rookie and at best be the third option. So I wouldn't expect the world from him in year one. I still am going to want to see at least 700 yards, maybe four or 5 touchdowns out of him in order for me to justify taking him here at 202. But as early as 2025, he could be Bryce Young's number 1 option in Carolina. And he is the prototypical, alpha wide receiver build. And I think he really could develop into that. I have him ranked pre-draft as my wide receiver 5, kind of neck and neck with Brian Thomas, who's my wide receiver 4. Both of them are risky prospects, but both of them have a very sky-high ceiling if put into the right scenario. And I think this is a good one for AD Mitchell. So pretty happy to get him here at 14 overall.
Yeah, and as it turned out, Bryce Young had some of the worst receiver play in the league last year. So I think there is still, hope to be had there for Carolina. They had some of the worst separation rates, some of the worst drop rates, and all that stuff in the league. So I think that if Bryce Young is to, have definitely, we know Deontay Johnson's a good wide receiver, but if Adonai Mitchell is also a pretty good receiver, then I think that offense could maybe not skyrocket, but definitely improve a lot moving forward from the Adam Thielen and Jonathan Mingo days. So definitely like to pick there. And Adonai Mitchell's an athletic freak, so people are gonna just look at pictures of him and how big his muscles are, and they're just gonna stay in love with him, just like DK Metcalf. So here I'm gonna take Lad McConkey. I like the trajectory of him being Jayden Daniels, number 1 receiver. He gets drafted to New England, early second round, pick 34 here in this draft. And a lot of people like Lad, and he's a guy who, again, at this point in the draft, I'm kind of taking like where's the hype? Like where's the hype train? Where am I going to keep these picks flexible? You know, because my least favorite thing to do with these late round rookie picks is have to make them. Is be forced to select a player and now all of a sudden it's not a liquid asset anymore. Lad McConkey's a really fun name to say. I think he's a pretty talented receiver. I don't think he has the ceiling to be anything crazy, but I think his ceiling is probably something like Zay Flowers, Hollywood Brown early on. I think he could be like a top 24 guy. I don't think we saw like Demario Douglas and Kendrick Bourne and these guys be successful when they're the only ones getting targets. So if Lad McConkey's going to be virtually the only human being to throw to in that offense, then I can imagine him having a pretty decent year and putting up like wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 numbers and being serviceable for me right now. Or I could see him being just a flexible piece to use and move.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Lad McConkey, I don't think he has a sky-high ceiling, but I think he's one of the safer, not just receivers, I think he's one of the safer players that you could possibly draft in 2024, to be honest with you. I mean, he's probably not going to see many, if any, top 12 seasons at the wide receiver position, but he feels like a guy that could be, a mid to low-end wide receiver too for a very long stretch of time, just because of that play style that he does have. So nothing wrong there at all. You don't need to shoot for the moon or swing for the fences on every single pick you make. Sometimes you want to just grab your plug and play wide receiver 3 and call it a day. And I think that's exactly what Lad McConkey can be as soon as year 1, right? So I think there's a lot to like there. This next pick, kind of weird. I'm stuck between two guys. I'm stuck between Blake Corum going to the perfect scenario, hooking back up with his college coach and really only splitting touches with Gus Edwards in what is likely going to be a very run-heavy offense. However, I'm going to get a little risky and take Bo Nix. So in this mock draft, he goes number 42 overall to the New Orleans Saints. Derek Carr was not very good in 2023. He definitely leveled out a little bit towards the back half of the season. But I by no stretch think that Derek Carr's job is safe in New Orleans, especially if they do spend a top 42 draft pick on a quarterback. Now, Bo Nix, I don't think he's amazing. I don't think he's a can't miss quarterback. I think he is going to be I think his ceiling is really fun for fantasy football. I think his ceiling is something similar that we've seen of Jameis Winston, ironically enough, who the Saints recently moved on from, right? Bo Nix can be that guy that goes out there and throws for 4,000 yards, 40 touchdowns, and 45 interceptions, right? Like he's got a cannon for an arm, and ironically enough, he's kind of a loose cannon out there on the football field. Again, I don't necessarily think he's an amazing quarterback, but I think he could be fun to have for fantasy football. And the main driving factor that goes into this is if they're spending an early second round pick on him, he's likely going to get an opportunity the second the Saints are out of playoff contention this year. Chances are, if Bo Nix steps on the field, that means the Saints were well out of a playoff position, which means they probably have a top 5 to top 8 pick next year, which means they're going to get a really good wide receiver to pair with Chris Olave. So it's kind of a 2025 pick, kind of what we were saying with Jonathon Brooks. I don't think we're going to see a lot out of Bo Nix in 2024 if he gets drafted to the Saints, but there's not many landing spots that I like more at an opportune time for Bo Nix than an early second round pick to New Orleans. So a little bit of a hot take there, but I am going to take him at 204.
Yeah, and you think about it, like how quickly do these fan bases hop onto the rookie quarterback train? I mean, you have an old quarterback like Derek Carr. Like, there's no Saints fans who are thinking that Derek Carr is going to lead them to a Super Bowl. And the second that you see one of these guys, or one of those types of players start to struggle, Geno Smith, Carr, whoever, like people are going to want to see that young guy get a shot and see what they can be, because we've seen these random outliers where all of a sudden Dak Prescott turns into a franchise quarterback, or whoever. All of a sudden Sam Howell gives you a half a year of really good production, and he has some hope and potential behind him and all that stuff. So yeah, you never know. Here, I'm stuck. I do like Blake Corum. I like the landing spot with the Chargers, but I cannot pass up on Braelon Allen going to the Rams. It's become very apparent that any running back who takes all the snaps, whether it's Darrell Henderson, it's Kyron Williams, it's Cam Akers, whoever is taking those snaps is going to score fantasy points. And like Kyron Williams scored 10 touchdowns last year, 10 rushing touchdowns last year. If Braelon Allen, aka like what people think is the next Derrick Henry, the guy who was 17 years old playing at Wisconsin and running through people for at 17 years old, just ran for 1,250 yards and 12 touchdowns at Wisconsin. Big dude, and would score a lot of touchdowns for the Rams, and we get a lot of that goal line work. So I think that the floor would be very, very high. I think the ceiling would be like humongous if he goes and Sean McVay gets to, run this guy into the dirt. So I love Braelon Allen, love what he did at Wisconsin, love the fact of how young he is. He is. It doesn't tell me, but I know that he's young because he went to college and played super young. So
I think he's only
I'm
20.
gonna take him and he's ridiculously I don't know how it was even legal for him to graduate high school as young as he did. I didn't know that things worked that way. But I love Braelon Allen. I like taking him here.
Yeah. The only people that are going to be pissed off about this is anyone who has Kyron Williams, and I do think Kyron Williams retains his RB1 role with the Rams. But to your point, Braelon Allen's going to steal all the goal line work. He's going to get most of the short yardage opportunities there because he is just a big bruising back. And this would not surprise me because it seems like a very Sean McVay thing to do. Kyron Williams busts out, breaks out of nowhere. Hey, let's keep the running back cycle going. I mean, I saw a statistic. Sean McVay has drafted a running back, not necessarily highly, but Sean McVay has drafted a running back every single year since he's been a head coach with the Rams. I don't think the skid stops here just because Kyron Williams had a breakout season. I mean, Kyron Williams is still undersized, right? What he did, it's amazing what he did in 2023. The fact of the matter is this should not, people need to be prepared for the Rams to spend potentially the 99th overall pick on a running back this year, right? So kind of I don't want to say shy away from Kyron Williams, but he is not as safe as a lot of people think he is. But moving into my pick here, it's going to be Blake Corum again. Just the perfect scenario, staying with Harbaugh, only competing with Gus Edwards. I mean, it's going to be a run-first offense. He's going to get a ton of opportunity, and he's going to get to play for a coach that knows his exact skill set. So from day one, Blake Corum is going to be awesome, and he's probably going to be the 1A to the backfield with him and Gus Edwards here. So there is another player on the board that I would consider taking over Blake Corum here. I don't want to say it out loud because I want to see if you take him at 207. So yeah, I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to because I don't know if this would be the most popular pick here. But if Roman Wilson goes to Jacksonville in, the early to mid second round, and his only competition there is Christian Kirk, that's an automatic, you're a wide receiver too in an offense.
They did get Gabe Davis as well. Don't forget about him.
Yeah, true. But is Gabe Davis really is he someone that Gabe Davis isn't somebody who sees a lot of targets? He's someone who they throw the ball downfield to, 3 or 4 times a game. And, if he gets lucky, he gets lucky. But I don't think he's not really a focal point in offense, even though I do like that spot for Gabe Davis because we've seen guys like Zay Jones and shit like that, have fantasy productive games. I think it's a good spot for Gabe Davis. But if Roman Wilson, to me, the competition for targets is obviously Christian Kirk. He's the one who's going to, get the pepper treatment out of Trevor Lawrence if the situation remains the same. So I'm going to take Roman Wilson and just, the opportunity is there. And you, in order to score fantasy points, you have to get opportunity. We just saw Jackson Smith and Jigba, who we thought was the most, or at least I thought was the most talented wide receiver coming out of last year's rookie class. He was buried on the depth chart behind 2 guys and saw barely any opportunity and did not check many of the boxes that you wanted to see as a rookie wide receiver and you would have expected. You would have expected for him to knock off Tyler Lockett. That did not happen. Roman Wilson isn't going to have to necessarily deal with that. I think they're going to look to him probably early and often. I think he pretty much is going to be the other option other than Christian Kirk in that offense. Obviously, in the passing offense, I should say, because Travis Etienne is still obviously very good. But this one, comes down to landing spot for me. I think when you look at guys like, Pearsall, Troy Franklin is obviously going to be behind Marvin Harrison Jr. Pearsall is going to be behind, Michael Pittman and Josh Downs and all that stuff. So I'm gonna take Roman Wilson just strictly based off of what I think the opportunity would be for him.
Yeah, and Roman Wilson, I mean, going into that offense in year one, I think at the very least, I would expect him to probably win the slot role immediately, right? So there is a lot of opportunity to be had year one, catching the ball from Trevor Lawrence. And I'm pretty happy because you did not take Troy Franklin, who, Troy Franklin to me, I have him ranked above Xavier Worthy personally. I think Troy Franklin is really, really good. And I think a lot of people are kind of writing him off for whatever reason because he's not the shiny new toy that broke out, right? Like Troy Franklin was at one point neck and neck for the wide receiver 4 of this class. And that was to nobody's surprise, but he didn't test out of the combine like Xavier Worthy. He's not as flashy or as physical as Brian Thomas and A.D. Mitchell. He's not as sound of a route runner as Lad McConkey, but Troy Franklin is fast as all hell. And if you were someone who was high on Jamison Williams, someone who was high on Jalen Waddle, anyone who's high on these speed guys that, I mean, Troy Franklin is not a one-dimensional player. He can do more than just run in a straight line, but that is kind of where his bread and butter is. He can beat you that way. And I think that as a compliment to Marvin Harrison in Arizona, I mean, it forms a three-headed monster with Marvin Harrison, Troy Franklin stretching the field, and then Trey McBride. I think there's going to be tons of opportunity to go around in this situation. And is it my favorite scenario for Troy Franklin? Probably not, right? It's never good when you get drafted right behind Marvin Harrison Jr. But it is what it is. And I think there's going to be, either way, tons of opportunity for Troy Franklin, and he could go to Arizona and replace what Kyler Murray is now missing from Marquise Brown, right? I think it's a very similar play style that those two guys play. Franklin would do a very good job at filling that role. So I think getting Troy Franklin in this situation at 208 might be the steal of the draft, to be completely honest with you.
Yeah, and I mean, you obviously have a guy like Mike Wilson there, who I think they like in Arizona, but I don't think is necessarily etched in stone for his role there. But I do think that would definitely send a hit. It is tough getting drafted like right behind Marvin Harrison, because when you get drafted to a regular team that's not taking a receiver in the first round, like if someone got drafted in the second round to, I don't know, let's say like Carolina or something like that, it's like they're being compared to like Deontay Johnson. I was like, oh, you never know, like they could be better. But when a team is taking Marvin Harrison Jr. top 5, and they take you, later on in the mid-second, it's like, all right, like you know where their loyalties lie in terms of those.
The pecking
things.
order is set from day one.
Yeah, and it doesn't always shake out that way. I mean, draft capital only matters for so long. With these guys. I mean, look at the Lions. Amon-Ra St. Brown was what, a 4th, 5th round pick or whatever he was. Jamison Williams was a top 20 NFL draft pick, and he hasn't gotten nearly the amount of attention that Amon-Ra has. So definitely like the pick there, and like the situation that he's in, because you don't have to be the number 1 wide receiver in your offense to be productive for fantasy. We've seen a handful of guys be a number 2 in their offense and still be definitely serviceable and startable in those flex spots. But here at where are we at, 209, I'm gonna take Jaylen Wright going to Arizona. I think James Conner is like a great running back. I think he's very good at what he does. I think, Arizona does a good job of getting the most out of him. But like, I don't know. I think if Jaylen Wright is able to overtake really this James Conner role, and I think he can. Like, I mean, he's going to be the young buck. If this obviously does shake out, he rushed for 1,000 yards last year at Tennessee. Not really like too much of a receiving back. I think he kind of profiles like similarly to a guy like James Conner, who can bruise between the tackles and things like that. So again, strictly down to opportunity share, and this could change if the NFL obviously will shake out differently than this. But yeah, that's the point of the exercise. Is if Jaylen Wright does go to this situation, like I would want him here. And I would find that he would probably end up being more productive than, you know, I don't know, Malachi Corley or whoever. But I had another point to make, and it kind of slipped my mind, so I'm just gonna let you take it from there.
Excellent. I love it. Yeah, I mean, Jaylen Wright is one of the more athletic running backs of this class, right? He doesn't have the size and the strengths of Braelon Allen. I don't think he is necessarily the best pass catcher out of the backfield in this draft, but he's not bad at either of those things. He's kind of a jack of all trades, and I think having the opportunity to be the RB2 right behind James Conner, at some point Jaylen Wright will get opportunity because we know James Conner all too well. He will miss at least a few games this year. So it'll be exciting to see if Jaylen Wright can kind of capitalize on that in Arizona in 2024 if he does end up there. Now, pick 210, I'm swinging for the fences here. Xavier Lagette, it's a coin toss on him, right? He's either Jonathan Mingo or AJ Brown. I don't know what it's going to be. I personally think it's more Jonathan Mingo. But here's the real kicker of the whole thing. Jonathan Mingo was like the fourth or fifth wide receiver drafted in a lot of Superflex rookie drafts last year. You were not getting Jonathan Mingo at 210. You were getting Jonathan Mingo at the 1-2 turn, maybe 203, 204 if you're lucky. Xavier Lagette, he is all the way down here at 210. He goes to Pittsburgh, which is a really interesting situation to end up in because he is probably going to be day one wide receiver 2 opposite of George Pickens. This is going to be a very fun duo if Xavier Lagette hits for sure. But Xavier Lagette does have the opportunity to go to a team that presumably will have a good quarterback because between Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, one of them has to be good for Pittsburgh in 2024. Like, they're both starting caliber quarterbacks. One of them has to hit. I'm fully convinced that they will. And I would prefer if Xavier Lagette got to kind of be eased into it as a rookie, but maybe he doesn't need to. You know, if he is going to hit that ceiling of being an AJ Brown type, maybe he does need to be pushed into it from day one, right? So we'll see what happens there. It is a complete coin tossed, absolute boomer bust of a prospect, in my opinion. But at 210, if I miss, I'm not going to cry about it. If I hit, my league mates won't hear the end of it. So I'm going to take him here at 210.
Trust me, I know we never hear the end of anything. I definitely like the swing for the fences. Xavier Lagette, I think is a very good football player, and I think I think Pittsburgh is a pretty good place for him. Sorry, I just had a stroke in my throat. Now, for my last pick, I feel like I have to make it, very deep and analytical, right? So Keon Coleman's gross in Tampa Bay behind Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, who just signed his contract. I guess it's got to be Malachi Corley. I guess it would be between him and Will Shipley. I think Will Shipley could come in and compete with a Joe Mixon. Going in the mid fourth round, even. Estime is a guy who is kind of like a my guy from you. Bucky Irving is also a guy who's like a my guy. I think he's very talented and fun to watch. But yeah, I'm gonna go with Malachi Corley. Let's see, Baltimore didn't draft any other receivers in this draft, right? No, so
Nope.
yeah, he goes behind Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews. Again, it comes down to the opportunity, and I kind of remember what I was going to say before, and it comes down to these receivers too. When I drafted Jaylen Wright, it's like if Will Shipley had been the one to get drafted in the early third to Arizona, I would have taken him with the last pick, and it really just comes down to like when it comes to this range of guys, I don't have too much of a preference in terms of like who I think the best football player is, because I know that no matter how much tape, how many highlight tapes, or whatever that I watch, I don't know shit compared to these NFL scouts. Like, as much as I like to believe that I do, like, my eye test doesn't mean nearly as much as the draft capital and the money that they're investing. So I try to keep the personal bias out of it and just say like who had the most investment, and really who has the biggest chance to touch the football going forward next season. I mean, that's kind of how I wouldn't say lucked into, but that's how I got to take advantage of Christian Kirk's wide receiver one season a couple of years ago, and all these guys that I feel like I've been able to buy low on is because I just look like, where are the empty rooms? Where can this guy just climb the depth chart? Only one or two spots to really make himself relevant. So I think that's what I would be doing here with Malachi Corley, and a guy had a decent career in college, and Lamar Jackson. It's not lovely to have a Lamar Jackson pass catcher as a fantasy asset, especially when they're probably the third option, maybe even fourth option now that Derrick Henry is there, just in terms of who is touching the football in general, maybe not in terms of targets. But I think Malachi Corley would feel decent. He's a name that also is very fun to say, just like Lad McConkey, just like all of these guys, Michael Penix Jr., Penix Jr., however you want to say it, Bo Penix, whatever. I think he fits that mold. As you can tell, it's getting late. But I'm going to take Malachi Corley.
So I'm going to do something weird with this last pick. I'm between now on paper, I'm between Keon Coleman and actually Javon Baker out of all things. So Javon Baker doesn't go until pick 87 overall in the third round to Dallas, but there's a lot of opportunity there. And Javon Baker, for me, is a boomer bust prospect. And I like swinging for the fences this late in the draft. Not that I don't want to say 212 is super late in the draft. It's not a fourth round pick by any stretch, but it is late enough to where I'm going to start taking swings. Example, Xavier Lagette. Now, since I can't decide between the two receivers, I'm actually going to turn my head to the quarterbacks. So at 212, I can either get Spencer Rattler, who ends up in Vegas at pick 77, or I can go for Joe Milton, who at 107 overall in the fourth round goes to the Giants. Now, I personally think that Spencer Rattler is a better quarterback than Joe Milton in just about every way, shape, or form. However, I'm going to take Joe Milton here. And I'll explain why once I can find him by scrolling ever so far on Sleeper. So Joe Milton is a project. Joe Milton is a big project. Now, the Giants, they need a quarterback, and they need a quarterback very badly. It's only a matter of time before, if Joe Milton goes in the fourth round to the Giants, he'll start as the backup for New York behind Daniel Jones. And let's be honest, it's only a matter of time before he steps foot on the field at some point in the 2024 season. Now, there will not be a lot of stock put into Joe Milton in the fourth round. And if the Giants have a top 5 pick next year, yeah, they'll probably still go quarterback. But you look forward, the 2025 quarterback class is not sexy by any stretch of the imagination, right? So if they can double down, just coast through 2025, if Joe Milton plays even 5 or 6 games and he is half decent for them, if he's showing promise, I wouldn't be surprised if they win offensive lineman. I wouldn't be surprised if they get another wide receiver. Maybe that is a pipe dream. But Joe Milton has probably the strongest arm in this entire class. Is it accurate? No. Can he clear the entire length of the football field? He sure can. And you got Odunze with the Giants. You got Darius Slayton, who's fast as all hell. You got Jalen Hyatt, who's fast as all hell. If there's going to be one NFL team that can just throw the ball up because someone's going to be down the field, it's probably going to be the Giants. They have a lot of underrated speed on that offense. So is this a hot take? Absolutely. Should you be taking Joe Milton 107 overall over Spencer Rattler 77 overall? Probably not. Should you be taking him over second round wide receiver Keon Coleman, second round receiver Ricky Pearsall? Probably not. But if I have a very limited amount of picks and I'm sitting back at 212 and I'm really swinging for the fences, Joe Milton is the guy who has the rushing upside. He's a big freaking dude. He's like 6'5", 250 or something like that. Like, he's almost as big as Cam Newton, right? So this whole spiel is a big hot take, but it's 212. I'm swinging for the fences. If he hits, awesome. If not, whatever. I'm not going to lose sleep if Spencer Rattler has a better 5 starts in 2024 or so on and so forth. So that's my rant.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie, dude. If I had realized, if Sleeper ADPs wasn't so fucked up, I would have taken Spencer Rattler at the 1.
Yeah, I don't know about that. But
Joe Milton's fun. He's big. At the 212, the cost is what it is. Go get your guy. I like to resort to draft capital and what the depth chart of those teams looks like and who do they have to pass and all that stuff. But yeah, you can't fault anyone for taking a shot there at the end of the second round.
Yeah, and I think if we were going into the third round in this rookie draft, we're going to wrap up here in a minute. I would be more comfortable getting Joe Milton towards the end of the third round. But the fact of the matter is, I would say in a normal draft, Pearsall, Coleman, maybe 2 of the third round receivers, Jatavion Sanders, Spencer Rattler, and probably a running back wild card will definitively go before Joe Milton. So that's 7 picks, right? So let's say around 3-6 is probably where I realistically would start looking for Joe Milton. I just wanted an excuse to talk about him, to be honest. So yeah, 212, probably a bit of a reach, but the Giants is actually a pretty intriguing scenario for him to go to, but it is what it is. So that's going to do it for us here on Goal Line Dynasty. As you can see, we have a lot to say about these rookies, and we will continue to have a lot to say about these rookies. But before we wrap up the video, Tyler, any closing remarks, buddy?
Not really. I mean, I would say that ours definitely shook up differently than I think a lot of other mocks will, mostly because I think we ended up taking Trey Benson higher than most mocks are right now, and Brock Bowers ended up falling lower. But I think we gave plenty of rationale for that, and it came down to obviously landing spots and just how we feel about tight ends in general. So I think if you're looking at this mock and thinking like, oh my God, if you just skipped to the end and said, oh, these idiots let Brock Bowers fall to the 110, like at least just go listen to what we had to say. Like if you want to disagree with us and like argue with us in the comments, like that's totally fine. But just don't tell us we're idiots without listening to what we had to say.
Yeah, you educate yourself before you call us idiots, and then we'll agree with you because we are. But like this video if you enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button to not miss a single video. And like Tyler said, feel free to leave us a comment. Hopefully nice comments, but if you want to call us idiots for one of these picks, hey, you go right ahead and you do that. But for myself, for Tyler, for Goal Line Dynasty, we will see you guys next time.